So the new Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggers, comes out in about a month and a half, dropping on Christmas Day. What a glorious day for that occasion. And of course, as we all know at this point, Nosferatu is basically Dracula, based off the same original novel by Bram Stoker. And Dracula is one of the most versatile and iconic horror characters to ever exist, going all the way back to when the novel was first released and some history of impaling. There is no shortage of Dracula content out there. Dracula is even public domain right now, at least if you draw from the original novel and not copy any specific interpretation. But the point is, there is so much Dracula out there to be explored that it's almost a little bit overwhelming to try to get into any of it now. I've been a huge fan of Dracula ever since I was a kid. Watching the old Universal Bela Lugosi movie and being captivated by that when I was younger. And then, of course, seeing all the various interpretations over the years. I've even named my cat Dracula. Not for any particular reason. I just wanted a silly name for a cat and it seemed to fit okay. But now, I guess if you ask me, my technical favorite version of Dracula is my cat Dracula. But besides that, when it comes to the world of media, I figured, to lead us into Nosferatu coming out very, very soon, which I've been super hyped for the entire year. By the way, if anybody out there is connected, can you get me an early screening? I know I'm not one of those cool YouTubers that gets to go to premieres and stuff, but I have been singing the praises of this movie all year. So if there's anybody out there watching that's connected, yo, hook me up, man. But here I'm going to give you my top 10 Draculas in movies and television. And this is not a list or ranking based upon the films themselves. This is purely going off of the character of Dracula in the film. So it's the interpretation of Dracula, not the movies themselves. That would be a different ranking, and I wanted a little bit more variety here. And I feel like I do have some good variety. So let's get right into it. And my number 10 is going to be a very recent adaptation. And I have to put this in there just because I find him to be so entertaining, almost no matter what he's casted in. I'm going to go with the Nicolas Cage Dracula from the movie Renfield that came out last year. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of this movie overall, but there are some things in it that I really enjoy. I love the references to the original Dracula movie with the black and white early on, and you can just tell that Nicolas Cage is having the time of his life in this role. I am a Nicolas Cage supporter. I don't care whether it's a ridiculous movie like The Wicker Man or whether it's one of his truly dramatic performances like in Pig. I am a Nicolas Cage supporter over here on this channel, and I love that he finally got a chance to play Dracula, and no pun intended, he sinks his teeth into the role and does a magnificent job. The overall movie surrounding him might not be the best, but his specific portrayal of Dracula, the look of him, and the fact that you can tell that Cage is having the time of his life, it all comes together in something that I find to be very special within his performance. And like I said, I wanted some variety on this list, so I have some funny Draculas, I have some scary Draculas, I have some animated Draculas, so there's going to be quite the variety here, but we're going to start strong with Nicolas Cage. Actually, you can't really, how do you go even stronger than Nicolas Cage, actually? Maybe it should have been up higher, but anyways. My number 9. This is going to be the Richard Roxburgh performance from the movie Van Helsing. Okay, so once again, I don't love the movie, but I think his portrayal as Dracula is very good. I think he brings elegance to the role. I like his body language. I do think that within the world in the film that he's in, he is intimidating. Like, he's not going to be up to par with some of the other Draculas in this list, but when you're doing an action-adventure movie, he's a great villain. You get to see him fight against werewolves and, Frankenstein's in there. And look, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of turning the old, scientist hunting Dracula into an action hero and putting Wolverine in the role. But I do think that we missed out on a cinematic universe that could have been, because the same director of Van Helsing directed the first two Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser. And if you could have combined that universe, like, he already did a remake of The Mummy, from the Universal Horror selection, and then he added in Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman. if you could just like bring that all together, we could have had Brendan Fraser's Rick O'Connell, and then we could have had Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing team up into like a shared universe, monster universe. It's probably better that they didn't do it, but hey, it would have worked out better than the dark universe that they tried to do with Tom Cruise. I mean, that fell to shit. And this would have been a little bit too early because this was the early 2000s. So if Van Helsing had come out after, Marvel and the Avengers, then maybe they would have shot for it. But unfortunately, it was a little bit too soon. My number 8 spot, I'm going to put to Gary Oldman in the 1992 Francis Ford Coppola Dracula movie. Now, I love this movie a lot. I actually just rewatched it not that long ago. I bought the 4K version, and it is the 30th anniversary of that film this year. And I think this movie has a lot of spectacle. I think it does a lot of justice to the Bram Stoker novel while also adding in its own thing. I think it combines both because it takes like the Vlad the Impaler concept, and then it takes, the Dracula from Bram Stoker. And then it also has like a very heavy emphasis on the romanticism and the sexuality of Dracula. And I think that when it comes to vampire media, having sexual themes is always very, very high. But in the Coppola movie, it's very much about a tragic longing. It's where Dracula wants to get with Winona Ryder's character based upon the love that he lost many, many centuries ago, kind of bringing it back, and the lengths of which he will go to achieve this. And you see a lot of passion in his performance. You see a lot of longing in his performance, a lot of kind of deep, dark depression in his performance as well, where he's given himself over into being this monster and he knows that he has to live with this forever. So you see a lot of variation that maybe you don't get in other Dracula interpretations, but at the same time, it does take a little bit away from Dracula being scary or intimidating or a monster when you see him kind of being as vulnerable as he is in this movie. The visual spectacle of the film is great too. I'm not reviewing the movie, of course. I'm just doing the Dracula performances, but I think that it's good. I think it's solid. I think it's in a good movie, just not my specific preferred interpretation of Dracula as a character, but I do think they do a lot of creative, interesting things with it, and it is definitely worth a rewatch once again if you haven't seen it in a while. At my number 7 pick, I'm gonna butcher his name because I actually have never heard it pronounced, so I don't really know how to pronounce it correctly, but it's Duncan Regier, I think, playing Dracula from the movie Monster Squad. So once again, I'm completely shifting gears, and Monster Squad, although it is, I would say, a kid's movie, it does have some scary sequences. I mean, scary for kids, right? But what I like so much about his portrayal of Dracula in this movie is that he does play it straight. So although there is this kind of fun, The Goonies, adventure, classic, Fright Night, 80s horror movie vibe to it, his portrayal as Dracula is just completely straightforward the entire movie. I mean, he's taking out police officers, he's picking up little girls and calling them bitches.
Give me the amulet, you bitch!
Like, he is just a dick the whole film. He plays a great villain, and I think if you're going for that kind of fun, campy adventure, that classic 1980s vibe of what Dracula could be, I think that, I can't picture him playing the character any other way. I'm glad that it's not goofy. I'm glad that it's not over the top. I think that he plays it straight, and that's what makes the movie work so well. And that's why, despite all of the fun that is happening in the film, he still feels like a legitimate villain to overcome. So for that reason, he's got to be on the list. In my number 6 spot, I'm going to put Dracula from the Castlevania animated series from Netflix. Now, I know a lot of people have mixed feelings on this show, as do I to a degree, but I do think the first 2 seasons are great. It was definitely a huge risk to kill off Dracula at the end of season 2, and it is a decision that I think the series never quite recovered from, even though I think Season 4 brings it up a bit from where Season 3 was, but those first 2 seasons where Dracula is the main antagonist, that is Castlevania. It's based on a video game, obviously, and Dracula was the main villain of the video game, so yeah, getting rid of him, maybe not the smartest decision, but I love the portrayal of Dracula here. I love the look of him and the design as well, because he's got that sort of intimidating elegance to him. The vocal performance is great. And once again, you're kind of dealing with the lost love aspect of Dracula, where they, burned his his woman at the stake, and so now he's seeking vengeance and attacking the town, unleashing demonic creatures. And as powerful and scary as they portray him in this show, you definitely see that kind of darkness and sadness that's within him too, that once again maybe similar to the Coppola version of Dracula, where he's renounced himself to be a monster based upon things that have happened to him, and there's no taking it back now. He's stuck here with the role that he has chosen, and he has to play his part. The final battle between Trevor Belmont, Sypha, and Alucard all fighting Dracula together is just a spectacle to behold. It was the peak of the series. Unfortunately, the show did go downhill after that, although there are good things in season 3 and particularly in season 4, but season 1 and 2 with Dracula as the antagonist was the best. At my number 5 pick, I'm going to put Klaus Kinski's Nosferatu from the first Nosferatu remake that came out in the 70s. This is a movie that I never really gave too much credit to at first, because it kind of fell to the background with me, because I love the original Nosferatu. Obviously, I love the original Dracula, and this one just kind of was lost on me for some time. I had seen pieces of it, but I never really gave it its due. And after watching it, I can say that his performance is incredibly unique. It's very sad. It's very melancholy. It's very kind of it's depressing, but in a good way, in like a horrific way. Once again, you really see the darkness, you really see the longing, and he really puts his all into this performance, from the way that he speaks to his body language, and it even inspired Robert Englund doing Freddy Krueger a decade later, some of his mannerisms and the way that he would walk and move within this movie with Klaus Kinski. I do think it's worth checking out, and I do think that in the pantheon of Dracula performances, it definitely is a standout. You really remember the way that he speaks and the way that he moves, and just the tragedy of the Dracula character really comes out in this version, so definitely worth being on the list for that. This next one at number 4 was a very, very difficult one to place. I really had to think hard about my favorite versions of Dracula, and this is a list based upon my personal favorite Draculas, not necessarily an objective best Dracula list, so just getting that out of the way before I get to this pick. But my number 4 is going to be Bela Lugosi from the original Universal Dracula movie from 1931. Now, I will say I love this movie so much. I watch it every October, every Halloween spooky season. This movie has everything that I want to put me in the mood of Halloween. I love the way the sets look. I love Renfield going to Dracula's castle in the beginning. Even though it deviates from the novel, there's something about that I really, really love. And of course, Bela Lugosi's performance as Dracula pretty much set up the standard of what would be the cliche Dracula performance. Everybody mimics Bela Lugosi, and obviously, you know, it's been told millions of times, but the accent that Bela Lugosi has was incorporated into the Dracula character. It wasn't told to him to do an accent. That's just the way that he spoke. And then that became the way that everybody interpreted Dracula afterwards. It's the look with the cape and the hair and the way that he stares at the other characters. All of that stuff, everything that happened in that original Bela Lugosi Dracula movie are all of the templates that everybody took and made every other Dracula afterwards. So it is absolutely iconic. I love watching the movie. I love the feel, the vibe. It's before they really put music into movies, so a lot of the silence makes it very creepy and uncomfortable. Oh man, I just love everything about this movie, man. Dwight Fry as Renfield, it's just so good. But just going with the Dracula performances, this is one of the best, and it stands the test of time for that reason. And I can't believe we're only a few years away from it being 100 years old. 1931. So we're almost there. Crazy. If you have never seen the Universal monster movies, particularly Dracula and Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, please do yourself a favor, because they are timeless films and it's still great to this day. I hate that I have to put it at number 4, but there are 3 Draculas that I think should be higher. And that's because at number 3, I'm putting the Christopher Lee Dracula from the Hammer films. What can you say about Christopher Lee, man? One of the most badass actors to ever exist, has played Dracula more than any other actor, and The Hammer Dracula series are a ton of fun. Not all of them are great. The first one is Horror of Dracula, which is really great. You got Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, but Christopher Lee brings something to the Dracula role that just feels so different than any other actor that's taken on the role. And I can't really narrow down what it is other than the fact that he actually feels fucking terrifying. Like, he feels like a dude, first of all, just the look of him, he feels like somebody that's just going to come out and kick your ass to begin with. Somebody that has this elegance to him, that has this sophistication to him, that if you show up anywhere around him, you're going to feel like you're underdressed to begin with. And then he looks at you and you feel like he's going to kick your ass. But then he shows that he's a fucking vampire, and it goes even further than that. He has this power to him, this presence to him, and I think it's because he got to play Dracula multiple times that you really get a sense that he knows this character and understands this character. Now, I know in real life he has said some comments about like not enjoying being typecasted as Dracula, or the fact that he had to play Dracula so many times. Like, I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard in interviews he requested that nobody brings up Dracula. Like, it's kind of this, I don't know, I feel kind of bad because it's the role that I feel like he's the most known for, but it's the role that he kind of regrets to a degree just because he had to do it so many times and didn't get to do as much variety, I guess. I don't know what the real reason is, but my God, I mean, despite how maybe he felt about portraying the role, damn, does he do a good job. Damn, does he do a good job. I just think that he's fantastic, and there's more to work with. You know, with Bela Lugosi, he only has that one movie, and that one movie is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Yes. And maybe none of the Hammer Dracula movies are quite 10 out of 10, but the fact that Christopher Lee got to play Dracula so many times, he just perfected the role. I just love him as Dracula, and so he's my number 3. And with that, I know you're thinking, well, what 2 Draculas are above Christopher Lee? Okay, I want you to remember something. This is a personal bias list of my personal favorites, not objective. I really want to say that before I get these next 2 out. Because my number 2 is Alucard from the Hellsing anime series. Now, maybe some of you watching this video are not anime fans. Maybe you guys have not heard of Hellsing. But listen, there's a character, the main character of the Hellsing anime. Well, it would be Hellsing Ultimate. That's the name of the anime that you want to watch. There is another Hellsing anime, which is also good. But if you wanted to follow the manga, the traditional story, it's Hellsing Ultimate. It's 10 episodes, and it has what I think is pretty much the most badass version of Dracula to ever exist in any fictional media. He goes by the name Alucard here, which I know in a lot of other media, like in Castlevania, the animated series, Alucard is the son of Dracula. But in Hellsing, it kind of takes place in what would have been modern day at the time, and he's going under a different name, which is Alucard. But you find out that he's Dracula, you know, about midway through the series. It's not a secret. There's a whole big, couple of episodes explaining it. And this Dracula is terrifying, is powerful. He's a fucking maniac. He enjoys the carnage. He enjoys the bloodshed. He has this gravitas to him. Like, the way that he speaks, I love the dub with Crispin Freeman doing the voice. He just has this commanding presence that makes you want to shit your pants.
So you're going to tell me everything you know? Well, your blood will.
Summon up your familiars. Transform your body. Heal your severed legs and stand. The evening is still so young.
Not to mention, this is by far the most powerful version of Dracula I've ever seen in any fictional media. In this version, essentially every person whose blood he's drained, which is, millions at this point, he gets all of their, power, their essence, their ability, their knowledge, like all of this stuff. So Dracula has literally armies of people inside of him contributing to his power. He can regenerate from practically anything. He gets his head cut off. He gets blown to shit. He's constantly fighting against this Vatican warrior named Anderson that's cutting him up and chopping his limbs off. He completely regenerates. He can turn himself into giant wolves and other monsters and creatures of the night. And it's just, like I said, that gravitas, that presence, the vocal performance, the animation is stellar. Like I said, Hellsing Ultimate. Every episode is based on a volume of the manga, and they go on as long as they need to. Some episodes are a half an hour. The final 10th episode is like an hour and a half, so it's essentially a full movie. It's a contained series, so if you want to check it out, I know some people watching this video might not be anime fans, but if you are a Dracula fan, I highly, highly, highly suggest watching Hellsing Ultimate, the anime. It's 10 episodes. You will not regret it. One of the best Draculas out there. And I'll tell you guys, I did almost put Alucard at my number one, but I feel like for number one, I really got to bring it back to the source. We're going all the way back. My number one is Max Schreck as Count Orlock from the original Nosferatu, the silent film that started it all. I have to put this at number one because of a couple of reasons, okay? So maybe I do like Alucard and Christopher Lee's Dracula and Bela Lugosi's Dracula a little bit more in the sense of their performance, right? But I think that Max Schreck as Orlock deserves to be number one for two reasons. One is creating the body language and mannerisms that would be forever imitated as Dracula for the rest of time. The shadows against the wall, the way that he would move, the way that he would look, the makeup that he had on, that image of that sort of like bat-like creature is just so iconic and something that is completely respectable for the time. And the other reason is he was the first, and I think that that goes a long way. He was technically the first on-screen portrayal of Dracula. And the way that the story, I mean, they changed things about the story. They changed the location. They changed the names of the characters. They were trying to avoid getting sued. It didn't work out for them, but thankfully the movie still exists. And when it comes to these really old films, like films that are over 100 years old, silent films, I know it can be difficult sometimes to go back and watch them nowadays, but I think that also adds to the creepiness factor of it in a way, because you're watching actors that are long since past. You know, it's like film and media, the fact that film exists now, it is like a window into the past. And maybe we don't really see it that way because we are often watching movies that are more recent, or maybe we go as far back as like the 70s. But the fact that you can go back and watch a movie from the 1920s and it exists, and you can see the way people acted back then, the way they were presenting stories back then when film was brand new. It's just this more recent thing that, you know, you never had before, where you could never go back and see somebody put on a play in the 1700s or something like that. You know, we have documents and we have historians and stuff, but we'll never have real footage of anybody existing back in, you know, 1800s or 1700s, whatever. But we do have film that we can see how people acted back in the 1920s. And something about that is so cool to me, along with just the way it looks, the performance, the legacy of it. So, of course, the original Count Orlock, the original Dracula, is number one for me. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of my list down below, and also put your favorite interpretation of Dracula in the comments. As always, guys, thanks for watching this video. I do appreciate it. Please give it a thumbs up and a comment if you enjoyed it to help it out in the algorithm. And if you would be so kind, please consider joining the Patreon or channel memberships, because it really helps me out. I'm working on some bigger projects. I also want to start writing something that's going to take me a little bit more time, so all of that stuff helps me just be able to keep the lights on while I'm trying to work on stuff, instead of just putting out videos every single day. You know, I can take my time and make longer videos and better videos, but I need like the Patreon and channel memberships, and I need to be doing that to make that possible. So just consider it $1 a month if you will, or whatever you want. But other than that, guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys very, very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.